I joined DHL in the month that Lehman Brothers went bust. And so as soon as I joined, the GFC started. The logistics industry is directly correlated to the size of the global economy. So within weeks of me starting in a new strategy role, the company was absolutely under pressure and in real dire straits and had to transform in a record amount of time. And so as a next consultant, my strategy role was quickly forgotten.
What does it take to grow a global event and stay grounded in who you are? Today, my guest is Cedric Cornelis. He's the Chief Commercial Officer at Tennis Australia, a former Bain consultant, and has led many organizations through big transformations. He joined DHL the month Lehman Brothers collapsed, moved to Singapore to build a global pricing team, guided teams during COVID at Seek, and later stepped into the C-suite at Tennis Australia. What stands out most is how he prioritized curiosity over comfort, time moves around his family, and used gratitude to beat imposter syndrome. If you're chasing big goals and trying not to lose yourself in the process, this one's for you. Cedric, I'm incredibly excited to have you here. When I first came across your story, what stood out to me wasn't just the international arc of your career, from Europe to Asia to Australia to the US at one point, but the way you've consistently made decisions that have reflected that curiosity over comfort. You've taken on some challenging roles during challenging times, and you've succeeded through them. And you started your career in a highly technical field, shifted into strategy, then shifted into operating roles, which very few people get the chance to do. And then you jumped into a job where your passion really comes through in Tennis Australia. It's incredible how transferable you've been able to have these skills transfer between roles. Today, I want to explore both the practical and the personal sides of that journey, the traits that you've developed, but also the questions you've asked yourself along the way, how to stay curious, how to manage reinvention, how to make bold decisions when the path ahead is not always clear. So let's kick it off. I want to rewind a little bit to the early years when you were deciding what kind of life you wanted to build. So can you take us back to how it all started? Could you share your story from the beginning and how your career shaped out all the way to leading Tennis Australia today?
Great. Thanks for your interest, Anant. I'm very, very honored. So just to take it back to the beginning, I'm originally from Belgium. I studied engineering and philosophy purely out of curiosity and out of a personal challenge. I wasn't particularly passionate about science or maths, but it was a personal challenge that I wanted to take on. And after that, I stepped into a role that is as close to business as possible with engineering skills. I was a quantitative analyst for a trading floor in energy trading, and but very quickly understood that really I wanted to evolve in business, and that's what led me to go to the US and build some proper business skills through an MBA at Kellogg. And that's where I discovered the world of strategy consulting that I didn't even know existed, and joined Bain for a summer internship. Really had a fantastic time there of learning, and decided to join Bain full time after, which was the best stepping stone and best platform to apply my newly acquired business skills. And just to take a step back, the goal initially for me was really to discover the world and continuously keep learning. So I wanted to have an international career, and I wanted to have the most possible learnings I could along the way. And so yeah, that's what kicked it off. And then after at some point after Bain, at Bain, I just wanted to get deeper into things, to really have that international career, more embedded than flying out on a Monday and flying back on a Thursday, and see my recommendations come into fruition. And so that's where I decided to take an operational role.
That's fantastic. And the Monday to Thursday flights, are exciting at first, but they really start to get to you after a little while. What convinced you when it was the right time for you to leave Bain? Did you find that it was sort of the push you've sort of hit the limits of consulting, or the pull, there was another irresistible operating challenge that you wanted to take on?
It, it was definitely the pull, but also the advice I was getting from partners at Bain. And the advice really was, if you don't want to be a partner, if you don't want to be on partner track to become a partner, then probably case team leader, manager is the best level to step out into and go into the industry, go into the corporate world. And so that's the advice that resonated with me, and it coincided with a time where I could see good opportunities. And the two probably mainstream ways of branching out from consulting into the industry are either go work for a client, and the client that knows you will give you that operational role because they know you and they trust you, or you go into a company that doesn't know you and you enter through the strategy team and you do great work in the strategy team, and then from there you can branch out. And I was at a point at Bain where I was with a client that has left a lasting impression with me that I really loved, and they were talking to me about a job, which was really fascinating. And at the same time, I had the opportunity to talk to DHL, and DHL kind of said the words that I literally wanted to hear. They said, "We are the most international company in the world. If an international career is what you want, we are the best to provide that, and we can guarantee hand on heart that you will get to go work in interesting places." And so when that choice came, I think I was the heart was really compelled by the adventure of DHL.
That's great. And very few people have that opportunity to be able to work for a company where they're able to travel so extensively internationally. So obviously, international travel was, or international exposure rather, was a big criteria for you. Did you sort of think about other things top of mind, like leadership style, potential for scaling in that role? How did you weigh some of these criteria? And the reason I ask is a lot of young consultants today, when they're planning to make a switch, they think about a number of different things. But if you were to distill it, and I know this is tough, but if you were to distill it into, let's say, a 3-point checklist, what would it be, and how would you advise a younger consultant on pursuing a different role?
Yeah. No, number one was that international exposure. I really wanted to discover the world. I really wanted to have that international experience, and it was genuine curiosity. But it also was. I thought it also was an investment in skills. I thought in a globalizing world, it is a skill to be able to adapt to different environments and to have experience in different cultures and different countries. So I thought it was a skill. And number two was. Uh, a path to continuous learning. I really wanted to be challenged in all of my roles and have that continuous learning. And number three, linked to number two, is I really focused on transferable skills because I wanted to experience as many opportunities as possible. I understood that transferable skills would be really helpful because it would enable me to see different industries or take opportunities that would value my skills rather than really specializing into a certain specific skill or industry.
That's great. And even for me, when I was sort of deciding on which role I wanted to take on after undergrad, the choice really just came down to which role in which city. But you've lived roles across multiple geographies, different challenges. What were some of the variables that you didn't appreciate until much later? Maybe it was timing or culture of the company or even family context. If you were talking to yourself in your mid to late 20s, what factors ended up being larger than you expected beyond some of the beyond some of the obvious trade-offs?
I think that the timing is the obvious one that is really important. I don't think I underestimated it, but I always had to put family first, and so I always wanted to have a really harmonious family life. And any adventure we took on, it was an adventure that the family took on. I met my wife in high school, so we have a long history together, and we we shared that passion of discovering the world, but it always needed to work for everyone. And for example, the opportunity to do an MBA in the US, that the stars aligned because we had a toddler and a newborn, and my wife had expressed the desire to spend time with them, and so that was a perfect time to go and study. even if it's a little bit daunting to go do that with a toddler and newborn. But it was perfect timing. And similarly, along the way, moving to Asia and then moving to Australia, it had to be also a great opportunity for everyone in the family. And so it had to coincide with times in the schooling of the kids that made it a good challenge and an interesting challenge, not a roadblock. So timing for us has been really critical. But it is it is really important to remain creative in those timings, because it is very easy to say, well, I have kids in school, so I can't move at all. Or I have this, so I can't move at all. And my kids and my wife, I'm very grateful for the efforts they've made, but they've taken it on as an adventure. My wife has let jobs for us to be able to move. But it was always with a sense of, this is an adventure of discovery for everyone, and it's very doable. We back ourselves to do it.
I'm curious, when you look back at those early years that you had at Bain, are there any stories, perhaps an intense client or a mentor's feedback or any setbacks or failures that you still replay today because it shaped how you lead and work in teams?
Overall, Bain was such a turning point in my career. It was a fantastic experience to really get exposed to a variety of business problems straight out of the MBA, and learn so much so quickly. So the learning aspect that I was looking for was absolutely amazing. In terms of what really stood out, I think that the client I ended up with, my last client that I stayed for 9 months with, was a high end pet food company in France, and I really recall great memories from that client, because they showed me from the inside what a fantastic organization could be. They were a combination of very lean, despite being a high end product. They were lean and frugal. They had a very strong culture, and they had a deep alignment in following a joint purpose. And so they had this inner passion that made them work in great autonomous way. They were lean, so they could make decisions quickly. Everyone was empowered. And what I remember from that experience working with them, and it's definitely a company I would have loved to join, if DHL hadn't come around with that international promise. That company has really showed me, as a youngish consultant, what great looks like for a company culture, and they've become for me that benchmark that has really helped me assess every organization I join and say, where could this be better based on that benchmark.
That's fantastic, and it's very rare to find clients like that where you would love to go in and actually go in full time with them. If we forward a little bit, you've taken this fast paced role at DHL, you flourished in this role, and they delivered on that international promise that they had made to you. You stayed for quite a while. What shifted for you when you got to that 3 and 5 year mark inside the organization? What do young professionals sort of miss if they never stick around long enough to see their career compounding?
I'd say that after a period of 18 months to 3 years, depending on how complex the role is and how complex the environment is, I think that you start to reap the benefits of people around you really knowing your values. So your customers, your stakeholders, your teams really start to know you and know your value. And in a corporate environment, that's where, if you've been genuine and authentic and stuck to your values, that shines through at that mark, 2 to 3 years, and then that makes everything so much easier. If your stakeholders, if your teams have seen you operate, and now you're not the new person anymore, but you're the person they've seen operate, they understand what you stand for, and they trust you. Your stakeholders trust you. There's this world of opportunity that opens up, because there's an accelerated path to outcomes, because that trust has been built, and I've really experienced that in multiple roles at that 2 to 3 year mark. After that, it's so much easier, and also so much more enjoyable, because at the beginning it's very normal. Teams, stakeholders, clients, they don't naturally trust someone who is new and someone they don't know. And so having built that, it's so powerful. It's a very rewarding experience.
Absolutely, and I was really looking for that sort of that time period where your career does hit that catalyst where you are able to express yourself more freely to all the stakeholders around you and really start to feel the compounding effects. Were there any moments in that tenure when you began to feel restless? How did you balance, not being able to learn skills against staying in a management role? And this is a big decision that many young professionals think through. What's your take? Is jumping to another internal team enough to continue driving growth in the organization, or do you simply have to go somewhere else and seek new challenges?
There are absolutely many options. As I said, I've always had the goal of continuous learning and continuous discovery, and I've always assessed the steepness of my learning curve. And at any moment where that steepness started to flatten, I would really ask myself questions and really look for opportunities. And probably even when that steepness starts to reduce a little bit, not don't wait for it to flatten, but as soon as the learning seem to be coming a little bit slower, I would challenge myself to find opportunities, and that's not always putting it on the company or on the environment, but it's putting your hand up for something new. It's expressing that desire to be challenged, to your manager or around you, and it's really taking on the new opportunities. And in many cases, organizations can provide more opportunities, more development by giving higher duties, by asking people to step out of their comfort zone, for asking people to work on cross-functional projects or whatever it could be. And then for me, that was obviously the priority. And then when that didn't really lead to a pipeline that I thought was sustainable, I would start getting the feelers out and start being curious about what other opportunities are there outside of the company in other environments. And that's where some of those opportunities to move to other industries have come from.
And this is something that a lot of young consultants and young Bainies especially suffer from is you're constantly surrounded by very intelligent people when you're working at Bain, and you start to develop almost this imposter syndrome. Am I good enough for my next role? It feels like that at Bain because you're working with highly intelligent people. How do you, in the next role, bring back some of that confidence? Did you ever feel that imposter syndrome? Did you always feel confident? And where did that confidence really come from?
Look, I think I was reading the other day that if people who are high achieving, if they don't have an imposter syndrome, it's because they're not humble enough. So that was very reassuring to read. I think we all experience imposter syndrome at times, especially when we step outside of our comfort zone. That's very natural. But I think the confidence comes from outcomes and from having little wins that turn into big wins. And it's just about having a bit of continuity in that drive, and finding confidence is also something that is self-taught by looking after those wins, and just trying to achieve and get outcomes.
How did you feel at Bain? Did you feel like you had imposter syndrome? And the reason I ask is because someone who's had such a remarkable career curve, if they feel that way, then it's totally okay to feel that way for a lot of people. When did you feel like, you kind of got over it, or perhaps you didn't have it? And why, if you didn't have it, then how can people sort of think their way through that?
Yeah, I've had imposter syndrome in every single one of the roles I've taken at some point. There's always that question. There's always that question, and I think anyone who is a little bit tough on themselves and wants to genuinely have a positive impact, I think will have at some point that imposter syndrome, because moving things in big organizations is complicated. Change is complicated, and having impact in any kind of human organization will have drawbacks, setbacks, and will have challenges. And so I think that imposter syndrome can pick its head with anyone at any time. But I think it's just finding the joy, as I was saying, finding the joy in the wins and in the outcomes that are the fruit of hard work and dedication and grit. But there's also just, I think, just basically being grateful for the opportunities. And every time I face challenges or I have self-doubt, I just remind myself that I'm just so grateful for the opportunities I've received. I do realize I've been extremely lucky, and I'm very thankful for that. And the various opportunities that have come along the way, some of them have been provoked by what I was looking for, but I'm still extraordinarily grateful for having the opportunities, having the learnings, being able to live the life I live. I think that part of being grateful is extraordinarily helpful.
That's true, and it truly is incredible how much gratitude can change your attitude around a lot of these topics.
Yeah,
You know
absolutely.
what's really interesting is that you may get over that imposter syndrome, and the next day, your life or your role takes a bit of a 180. I'm reminded of the story that you had shared about leading through the global financial crisis in '08, and then again leading through COVID. I'd love for you to tell that story. You know, it's clearly the problem was clearly a lot bigger than you could have controlled, but would love for you to unpack that experience, and also unpack the experience of leading Tennis Australia through the COVID crisis.
Yeah, sure. I think I'm very fortunate to have experienced crises that have led to incredible opportunities, and I've joined DHL with the goal of having an international career, but it happened way faster than I thought it would. Um, because I joined DHL in the month that Lehman Brothers went bust, and so as soon as I joined, the GFC started. The logistics industry is directly correlated to the size of the global economy. So within weeks of me starting in a new strategy role, the company was absolutely under pressure and in real dire straits, and had to transform in a record amount of time. And so as a next consultant, my strategy role was quickly forgotten, and I was asked to work on cutting costs at very high pace, to the point where the team I was in was part of the cost cutting, and was disappeared, and the headquarters I was in Brussels, the European headquarters, were shut down and disappeared. And that's when the opportunity for me, brand new at DHL, after 9 months, the opportunity came up to go start a new team in Asia, because Asia was the shining light at the end of the tunnel where there still was growth. So DHL was moving a lot of global functions to Asia, and they had the opportunity to go to Singapore in their Asia Pacific head office, and start a new global pricing team, which was an absolutely fascinating experience. But that came way faster than I was expecting, and was way more challenging that I was expecting when I joined DHL, because I was brand new in the industry, 9 months in, and all of a sudden have the opportunity to move and to discover a completely new team and start working in an operational role at DHL. And I think that the main the advice I received from my boss at the time, in a time of great internal chaos, way bigger than the external one, because this was an industry that was probably one of the most affected by the GFC, after banking. And the advice my boss gave me was just, heads heads down, stay calm, try to do the right thing. And I think that advice is something that stayed with me, and stayed with me for the next bit of crisis, which was really learning the impact of bringing calmness and rational thinking to teams and to stakeholders in big crises like that. It's very easy in organizations for panic, for emotions, for catastrophic scenarios to constantly be discussed, and to take over rationality, basically. And there's a huge strength in just trying to remain calm and rationally organize everyone's thoughts. And it has an amazingly calming effect that I've seen in the future afterwards. Just asking everyone to stop thinking about catastrophic scenarios.
Right.
Let's cool down the panic with just rational thought, and the intention of everyone trying to do a good job, without letting emotions take over too much.
And how did that sort of translate to the COVID crisis when Tennis Australia, which mainly is events and people weren't meeting up anymore. So how did you take some of the learnings that you learned from the great financial crisis and translate them to sort of keeping your team calm and rational throughout that process?
Yeah, I think that learning was really helpful in both the roles I had in COVID. I was with Seek, Asia Pacific's biggest job board, online job board, when the pandemic hit, and so managed a lot of the pandemic, while working for Seek, and helping teams and customers get through. And I think that message of being calm and trying to keep rational thinking, spreading the calm, rational thinking to stakeholders, to customers, is really critical. The second one that I really noticed during the pandemic was to double down on empathy and really try to understand, how our teams are thinking, how our stakeholders are thinking and feeling, and how our customers are thinking and feeling. And that double down on empathy, understand what everyone is going through, because everyone's going to do something different, is really helpful to then bring the calm and express the fact that we understand what you're going through, and we will think through this in a calm and positive way, with being outcome oriented, and that has then led to a transition to tennis, where I joined tennis towards the back end of the pandemic, but we were still experiencing lockdowns, and so that attitude of empathy and being a calm, rational presence, maintained its value.
That's incredible. And would love to double click into your experience at Tennis Australia because there's very few people around the world who can go through a full career arc and really end up in a place where they've been passionate about for years. You're now in a public facing cultural role. Do you find it difficult to reconcile the hard business imperatives with the emotional weight it carries for people? And also, would love to hear about your journey from playing tennis to now facilitating it for millions of people and how that passion has translated to business and then back to passion.
Yeah, I'm so humbled to be able to play a part in a role in a sport that I've always loved. As you said, I've played tennis since I was a kid. I've played at a very modest level. I've played competitive tennis in every country I've lived in, and every time it has given me a window into how the country worked. It has given me an opportunity to make new relationships, new friends, and so I think I owe a lot to tennis, because it has been a thread along the way in my life across the world. And as a young engineer graduating in Belgium, I had zero thought of ever working in tennis or in sport. I didn't think that was in the cards. And so it has come just from having chances along the way and building skills along the way that at some point led to the opportunity. But that was not planned, and I was not hoping for that. So I really got a lot more than I hoped for, um, which again, I'm humbled by it. And your question on emotion is a really interesting one, because sports generates enormous amount of emotions and passion, and relationships, and that's why sport is such a great vehicle in life. It's great to play sport, but people also love to watch sports for exactly those reasons. And so there is never an idea of taking emotions away from sport, and we shouldn't do that. I think what we try to do in the right way is to again to keep a rational mind when making organizational decisions. And that's where, very interestingly, I discovered that in sport, as you pointed out, um, the thinking, the critical thinking and the reasoning can sometimes be clouded by that emotion, because people feel such a deep connection to the sport. And that's when we just need to be careful not to have organizational decisions being biased by emotion, which is a challenge that I hadn't encountered that much in my life, and I find it a really fascinating challenge because it comes from a great place. It comes from a good place. It comes from people really caring deeply, but caring deeply and being emotional about a certain topic, about a certain sport, can create significant bias or can reduce people's appetite to think. Because when the brain is clouded by emotions, people want to make knee-jerk reactions. When actually you say, "Well, let's think about this for a second and try to take the emotions out of it," and that for us, that doesn't mean that financial considerations take over the emotion. Not at all. We are a tennis federation. We are a non-profit. Our ultimate goal is to grow the sport of tennis in Australia from grassroots up to professionals. We support grassroots level with the funds that we make out of our events, and up to supporting junior athletes, high-end athletes, and professional athletes. So it's not about money taking over, but it's really about making rational decisions to make sure that we optimize our way to the purpose. And our purpose is growing the sport of tennis, and we must make the right decisions when growing the sport of tennis to really get to our purpose in the best possible way, in the most efficient possible way. And that means sometimes being careful of our emotional bias.
And that's true. And you have an extremely challenging role, because now that tennis is becoming even more global and more accessible to different cultures and countries around the world, you're now not only dealing with, you know, emotions and feelings in one part of the world, you are now managing, you know, global emotions and feelings, which is an extremely tough job to do. So, you know, would sort of love to hear your take on that. And, you know, how does taking on passion into work change how you've experienced the sport over the years?
Oh, I'll be honest. It affects it affects the relaxing part of watching of sport a little bit. I now watch. I've always enjoyed watching tennis. I've always enjoyed playing tennis, but now watching tennis will always have that kind of a professional lens, and that look on the business aspect of it, and the organizational aspect of it, and the promotional aspect of it. So I probably, with this great opportunity that I'm extraordinarily thankful for, I probably lost a little bit of that favorite relaxing moment, which is fine. It's an okay
Right.
price to pay.
Yeah. And maybe you can watch pickleball casually. I'm totally kidding. Not even in the same ballpark. Um, you know, as you started your career, how did you define success compared to some of the Bainies around you? When you look back now, what moments really forced you to redefine what personal winning meant to you, and what replaced some of those earlier feelings that you have? Take us back to sort of your late 20s, early 30s self, and how you used to think about it then and how you're thinking about it now.
It hasn't changed much, to be honest, because for me, the goal was never a certain trajectory, and it was never a title. It was C-suite or CEO or executive was never an objective. Not when I graduated from university, and not later when I finished the MBA. The goal was always learning and discovery, and I thought that started through international exposure. So that really hasn't changed much. And even now, I'm always thinking about what's the pipeline of new discoveries that's coming up, and new learnings that I could I could search or find. And some of those, I haven't probably spoken about that yet, but some of those come from the teams we work with. I think that there's an incredible opportunity to learn from people around us. We always hear about team members ask for training on the job, which is a absolutely fair request, but a lot of that request for training and development um, often underestimates, in my opinion, often underestimates the value of just observing others. Everyone is good at something, and picking out working for a boss, looking at more senior people around you, or looking at peers, or even looking at teams, what they do well, and taking a learning out of that. I have always felt really, really humbled by the teams that I worked with, and how much talent there was there, and by observing, finding something to learn from literally everyone. And it just requires being curious and observant and taking the time to watch everyone's talents and say, I can take this idea from here and I can take that from that. And sometimes it's what people do wrong or badly is also a learning. But there's so much talent. I think we really underestimate the value of watching our surroundings and learning from what people do well.
Absolutely. And wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that. It's interesting because a lot of Baineys come out and perhaps they want to work in very high paying careers after Bain. Maybe perhaps they join a private equity firm or something similar. You just said that perhaps, it's not worth chasing some of those titles. Would love to understand from your perspective, did that counterintuitive, you not chasing those titles, did that counterintuitively lead you to going as far as you did? And is it true that chasing money really negatively impacts outcomes? And what should you really be thinking about when you're starting your career out of Bain?
Yeah, that's a huge question because the answer will be different for everyone. So my
For
first
sure.
advice my first advice to everyone is always to no, to try to know themselves. It's the most challenging thing in life is to know thyself, and know what you enjoy, what you like, know what you're challenged with, and what gives you satisfaction. I think for everyone, having a positive impact and is the way to satisfaction, and is a great generator of happiness. That's for sure. But it's for everyone. It's going to be different how they measure impact, and how they measure impact on the world surrounding them, whether it's impact on their family, impact in the organizations they work for, impact in creating something new. But I do think it should not be underestimated, the impact that anyone can have in alternative organizations, whether it is big corporate or now what I'm experiencing in nonprofit. I think the impact is probably not really industry dependent, but it's about feeling that someone is in the right place, and everyone will feel it when people are having impact where they are. They will feel that satisfaction, and if after a little bit of time somewhere, that satisfaction of having impact and generating outcomes and having creating positive momentum is not there, I think that's where it's really important to challenge oneself. And if and yeah, not every industry is for everyone. So that's I think that's how to judge it. People deep down, people know when the impact they're having makes them feel good. And I think that's a really important criteria.
And that's very true. And I would love for you to share the story of how you found your way into Tennis Australia's C-suite. It feels like the perfect example of how you demonstrated you were optimizing for all the right things, but rather it actually happened quite organically, and they were able to see some of those qualities in you and pull you onto the team. Could you just share some of the story of what that transition looked like for you?
It absolutely, it happened very, very organically and almost by accident, should I say? Because and again, this was not at all a planned move, because I've never planned any kind of trajectory and thought I'm going to do this role, then that will lead to this. Again, I'm repeating myself, but the goal was always learning, if possible, transferable skills, and discover to grow as a person. And the Tennis Australia opportunity came up because my passion for tennis was known around me in my networks, and I was put in touch during the pandemic with Craig Tiley, who is the CEO of Tennis Australia, and the tournament director of the Australian Open, because during the pandemic, obviously, he was very worried about the future of tennis and the future of Tennis Australia. Sporting organizations were hit very hard by the pandemic. They've had to deplete their reserves to stay afloat, and so Tennis Australia had no more financial reserves, and really needed the future post-pandemic to be extraordinarily successful from day one. And so through my networks, I was put in touch with Craig Tiley basically to have a coffee with him, because he was interested in having points of view from people of various industries on what could a rebound look like, what was critical, what needed to be done to make sure that the Tennis Australia stepped out of the pandemic and hit the ground running immediately. And that's when I explained my profile to Craig, had a coffee with him, had long discussions with him about brainstorming, about what was important, about what needed to be done in tennis, but really ideas at a very high level. And that led to another conversation, because the recently appointed Chief Strategy Officer of Tennis Australia was a Bainey, and so an ex-Bainey. And so the question was, well, you might know him. Why don't you have a chat with him, and you might have interesting brainstormings together. And so I had a chat with our Chief Strategy Officer at the time, and also discussed what we thought was important for tennis in very high level conversations. And that led to multiple conversations with multiple executives of Tennis Australia, and then board members of Tennis Australia, to in the end come to something that still remains a little bit surprising. Was, well, there actually is an opportunity to come to the team and start putting those ideas that we've brainstormed together in place. And it was obviously it was a little bit of a risky move, joining in the pandemic, joining an organization who had no financial reserves and needed an extraordinary plan to step out of the pandemic at a time where honestly nobody really knew if big events in big stadiums would still be popular. So it was a bit of a chance, but I had such a passion for tennis from a young age, and also been always curious to discover new things, that I thought this was a risk worth taking, and yeah, never looked back.
That's phenomenal. And if you had to design a set of experiences for young consultants and young people and young future leaders to build the same confidence, the same work ethic, and the same independence, what would you put on that list? What would you ask them to do while they're young to build up to that?
The driving thought for me would be curiosity. I would absolutely advise everyone, and especially younger consultants, to branch out and look for that new opportunity, whether it's a new challenging opportunity, a new challenging project, a new challenging client, a new industry. Whether it's within Bain, there's so many opportunities in Bain to be challenged, to branch out, to find something new. Sometimes it's supporting other departments. Sometimes it's working in recruitment. For that, all of those opportunities really bring amazing learnings, and they also bring the amazing satisfaction of contributing to the organization. So
Mhm.
whether it's within Bain or then outside of Bain, continuously branch out, put your hand up, try to find new learnings through new opportunities, small or big. There must be that relentless appetite and that relentless curiosity to find the new thing. And sometimes the new thing is very close and is a little increment. Sometimes it's a big step, but all of those little increments give you confidence and are a step forward.
That's fantastic. And Cedric, I really appreciate how candid and grounded you've been throughout this conversation and throughout your career.
Pleasure.
I know a lot of listeners will appreciate and relate to the way you've approached optimizing for the long-term drivers of your career. Before we close, I've got 4 quick questions to bring you back to the personal side of things. Would love to get to know you even better than we have over the last little bit, if that sounds good to you.
Sure.
Perfect. So before we end, what's the best investment you've ever made, financial or otherwise?
I'm really sorry. I'll be repeating myself again, but it's stepping out of my comfort zone. I think it's making the decision to go to the US to study with a toddler and a newborn. It's then in the middle of the GFC when the opportunity came to go to Asia, and then out of that from Asia when the opportunity came to discover a new industry and a new country and go to Australia. It was that, and every time I've taken on stepping out of my comfort zone, it's paid off in spades.
Incredible. And Conversely, what's the worst decision you've ever made, financial or otherwise?
I think I'd say probably something that where the decisions were a little bit made for me, but I think corporate training in general has relatively low yield. I really believe in finding learning within and being curious and read and ask people for advice rather than corporate training. I think corporates sometimes do training as a tick the box, and even those who do it genuinely, a lot of them are not very good at it. I think the only really valuable corporate training I've ever had was DHL, who rolled out all staff wide training on basic training on the fundamentals of what the company was, what the culture was, and what the purpose was, and putting everyone on that level playing field. I thought that was amazing. But otherwise, I have found low yield there, and I don't think my time was very well invested in that.
That's great. That's a very unique answer, actually. I haven't heard that one before. Well, what's a moment that you think about either personally or professionally more than most people would guess?
The very easy. I'm always thinking about the pipeline of ideas for the future, but the very simple one is I have three sons who will soon be out of the house, and so for me, what I'm trying to think about is how do I find the right balance of guiding them, helping them, but also advising them to make their own experiences, make their own decisions, and experience life on their own terms.
That's fantastic. And if your name, resume, and bio disappeared from Google, which is very difficult because you're everywhere on Google, but what would you want your family or close friends to remember you for?
Oh, I just like everyone. I think I want to be remembered for having a positive impact on everyone around me. And I think most of all, I'd love to be remembered for being kind and authentic. I think those are values I've tried to live by, um, and just pepper that with a lot of fun along the way. I hope people will remember me for being kind, authentic, but having had fun with me too.
Amazing. That's great. Cedric, thanks so much again for being here. It was such a
Thank
refreshing
you.
take. What stood out to me is how you've consistently made thoughtful choices without needing every answer up front. You moved countries, you switched industries, and you raised a young family mid MBA, which is very difficult to do. I think a lot of people don't appreciate that. But you've shown clarity doesn't always come first, and it can follow action as you focus on learning. I think a lot of our listeners will really take away how to build a meaningful career, and how that doesn't always come from a grand plan. You sort of sometimes figure it out along the way, and following the thread of what's interesting. And truly appreciated your take on beating imposter syndrome through gratitude. I think that's a really big takeaway that I think if people incorporated that into their lives, I think they find that sometimes it is just you're just grateful for the opportunity that you have and make the best of it. So really grateful for your time and openness today, Cedric.
Thank you, and I really appreciated the conversation. Thank you for your interest.
Thank you.
This video is presented by VJ Wealth and produced by AQ Productions.